Alright guys, we are on lesson 4 in unit 6, and we're switching from just talking about pests to pest management to talking about fertilizer. So we've talked about fertilizer a lot in unit 4. So in this unit we'll learn about how to use that fertilizer safely, legally, and appropriately. And there's a lot of different ways that you can apply fertilizer. Remember, fertilizer is, we call it NPK fertilizer. Remember, that's for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are the chemicals that heavily make up most fertilizers that are used today, because those are the chemicals that are nutrients that most plants are going to need, right? So they can do this in a liquid form. You see in this picture right here, it can be a solid form where it's slow release. There's several different ways to applicate it. So the best thing you need to do before applying fertilizer is figure out what you need. There's a lot of fertilizers now that are plant specific to your soil. So maybe get your soil tested, figure out what plants. That way you're, being the most efficient. Remember, we're trying to get to precision agriculture. So there's different ways that you can apply fertilizer. So you've probably seen this maybe at a golf course, or if you've played baseball or softball, someone maintaining the fields, or maybe in your lawn. It's called broadcasting. It can be done small like this, or on a larger scale. So that spreads the fertilizer over the ground in an appropriate amount, and then it's watered into the soil, tilled in, or left to absorb. And then there's banding. Banding is where, see how they have these long strips in the middle of the rows? So that's where they apply fertilizer in furrows a few inches from the seeds, so not directly on the seeds, the same time they plant them. It's most effective for plants that require phosphorus in their early stages. Side dressing, so that's where you scatter fertilizer 6 to 8 inches from the plant. This is most effective in home gardens. So those are some tomato plants, and they're applying it because, again, if you had a field of 40,000 acres, this would not be efficient. This is more so what you would use. Foliar feeding is a liquid formulation, and you just spray it onto the leaves of the plant. It makes nutrients immediately accessible to that plant. So those are different ways. Broadcasting is going to be the fastest way. But again, it's to fit your needs, whatever you're going to need. So fertilizer application rate, knowing that is essential to providing turf or crops the correct amount of nutrients. So you need to know how much fertilizer to use, right? You don't want to waste fertilizer and waste a bunch of money, and put extra chemicals in there, or not use enough and it not make a difference. So there's a ratio and a conversion that you use to calculate the fertilizer application rate. So the NPK ratio from fertilizer package or labeling, you use that to determine the total amount of nutrient found. So like that NPK, that stands for how many parts nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium there are in that fertilizer. Then your target rate, determined by soil testing and type of crop. So choose a fertilizer ratio that goes well with what you need. And the total area you're applying, so the area you're applying the fertilizer to. So their example is turf requires 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So if your fertilizer is 18% nitrogen, equation looks like this. So you have 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So that's 1 pound divided by 0.18 pounds, because we've got that in our fertilizer. So 5.56 pounds. So we need 5.56 pounds of fertilizer for our 1,000 square foot yard. And you will find this equation on the back of your fertilizer products that will tell you how to calculate. Now, a lot of it, if you're doing small scale, it'll just say like a cup or whatever. But these are for mostly large scale yards, those sorts of things. So their schedule, you need to have a schedule to it. You can't just randomly decide to do fertilizer. So for turf, like grass should be fertilized in the spring, midsummer, and fall. In warmer climates, additional late summer application could be helpful. So a lot of people remember like Memorial Day, July 4th, and Labor Day. Flowers, vegetables, and other plants, they're fertilized in early spring. They're fertilized after the final frost date. Fertilizing most effective in times of heavy growth. but timed after the plants are established. Houseplants are fertilized monthly during the spring, summer, and fall. You don't need to in the winter. So slow release fertilizers are practical for most gardeners, and they deliver a small amount of nutrients over a long period. Most fertilizers should be applied in the early morning and watered well. It's also best to water in the mornings because the sun's not as hot, you're not dealing with as high of evaporation, and etc.